Making headlines in Central Africa, coming after Africa Roundup. This is the area of the continent that we zoom into on this Thursday. And we speak to Aaron Ngambi. He's a geopolitical analyst. Aaron, how are you on this Thursday?
Morning, Yanda, and how are you?
I'm good, thank you so much. It's always great catching up with you on these stories in the region. Let's start today with the Central African Republic. Bishops there are appealing for an end to violence. People are said to be fleeing, and there's devastation as a civil war continues there from 2012. What can you tell us about this story?
Yeah, it's a very sad story, very unfortunate. There has been a civil war going on for a very long time. Unfortunately, the civil war hasn't received a lot of attention in the media as it should be. But it's very encouraging now to see that bishops that came from all different sectors and different backgrounds across the entire country have come together to actually call for this end to the civil war. If you look at the Central African Republic, I think about 76% of the population is Christian. They have about 16% Muslim and other minority religions. So I think that it's encouraging to see the predominant faith, the Christian faith, step to the plate and call for an end to this civil war that's been raging for many years now.
The bishops have been reported as saying that people have been shot, have been wounded, have been tortured, even executed, and they are calling for prayer. What's the response been to this call?
I think the response is positive so far, as we have seen that a lot of people seem to support what the bishops are calling for, because this is the only way out. It seems like the violence has been too much. Therefore, the call for peace, call for prayer is a message that I think a lot of people are waiting for. I think that these bishops are stepping to the plate and providing leadership in a crisis.
They welcome those who want to discuss and work on peace and reconciliation. Just yesterday in our home country, South Africa, we were talking about a national dialogue that's been called by our own president, Cyril Ramaphosa. Would this work in a similar fashion? Do we understand this call in terms of how it would work to discuss this work on peace and reconciliation?
Well, when you look at the call for peace and reconciliation, usually if it is a call from the politician and they have specific political agendas, you are bound to have some kind of hiccups or even obstacles along the way. But this call that is exclusively coming from the bishop in Central African Republic, they want people to come to the table, key decision makers and players in this conflict, so that they can dialogue and be able to forge towards peace. And I think that is more effective because then people do not perceive these bishops as being politically aligned.
Pope Francis made a visit there in 2015. What progress did this make to getting closer to peace in the country, if at all it did?
Yes, in 2015, we saw Pope Francis visit the Central African Republic. And like I said, this is a population of about 5.7 million people, and 76% are Christian, and 44% of that 76 are Catholic. So you are talking of almost the majority of the population are Catholic, and only 14% are Muslim and 10% are other ethnic religions. But the visit by the Pope was very significant. I mean, we saw a country that has been torn by war for some time and been able to come together for a moment and be able to acknowledge the presence of the Pope. So I think in that regard, the bishops coming together and trying to foster peace will perhaps bring back those memories and be able to allow people to have some confidence in the peace process.
All right, let's move on now, Aaron, to a UN regional office for Central Africa, or UNOCA. They've released a report on Central Africa. The report cites challenges, even though the area is rich in potential. What else is central to note from this report or observation?
Well, this report tells us that countries such as Chad and Gabon have made progress in terms of political development. Newly elected authorities must capitalize on that. Mm-hmm. And some of these developments, we've discussed them, I think, extensively. We've looked at Chad and Gabon in terms of what they're doing with the IMF and some of their agenda for development. And so those two are on a good path, though much can be done going forward. But also in terms of just political advancement. In Chad, you have about 34% of the National Assembly is supposed to be represented by women. And also Gabon has this new electoral code that mandates women to have at least 30% of the seats in the National Assembly. So all of these good indicators that there's progress in countries like that in the region, but there's still some challenges, and a lot of them. Of course, you look at Cameroon, is one of the countries where you will find a lot of problems in terms of politics and in terms of governance as well. And also you have conflict in other regions such as the Lake Chad Basin and the Great Lakes region. There's so many conflicts going on over there. And so this is what the report looks like. On one hand, I think we're making progress in a few countries. On the other hand, there's still challenges.
Rwanda and the DRC obviously were going to be mentioned, but what is the report saying in terms of humanitarian aid there?
The report actually talks about a humanitarian crisis, which is compounded by conflict with the neighboring Sudan as well. And so the report, when it comes to DRC and Rwanda, is not very, the outlook is not very good. And this is primarily because of what we've talked about in the past, the war and the conflict going on in the eastern DR Congo by the M23 rebels. That has created a huge problem for the region and for those countries.
Let's move to Cameroon now, where the opposition leader there, Maurice Kamto, has returned to Yaoundé. He was under house arrest. Why was he under house arrest?
Well, before he was under house arrest, Kantu was in France, in Paris. He had a huge rally with some of his supporters. And so, as we know, he contested in the previous elections, even though he didn't do very well. He claimed that there were some electoral malpractices. But then he went to France, he had this rally, and then when he came back home, he was put under house arrest for 48 hours. That's 2 days. And so we do know that this is just an attempt by the regime to restrict his movements because they have an election coming up in October 2025. So I think that this is just basically harassment and intimidation and also part of surveillance. They've been trying to restrict his movement so that he does not appeal to his base. He runs a political party called the Cameroon Renaissance Movement, the CRM.
And he intends to run in the upcoming elections under the Cameroon Renaissance Movement. Why is he being criticized by party officials from the ruling party, though?
Yeah, I think that it is just usual politicking. There's no basis for criticizing him for running again. I think he's determined to run. He has the constitutional right to do so. He's only 71 years old. And so he's up against the incumbent who's ruled Cameroon forever, since I think 1985. And so the current president of Cameroon, who's 91 or 92 years old, it's not even clear yet if he's going to run for re-election again in October this year. But the opposition leader, Kamtu, has, kicked off his campaign, and he is actually out there trying to get his supporters. But he has a message. He has a message, and he seems to be appealing for peace and calm, and not to have his supporters antagonize with the security forces. And so this is quite intimidating by government officials because they see him as potentially going to win this election, looking at the incumbent is age and also his health as well.
What do electoral laws provide for in Cameroon to ensure that when he does run, that his running or his campaign is allowed to be free and fair?
Well, that's a very good question. I think that the issues of free and fair elections for Cameroon has been a point of contention for many people. There are many people that really doubt the authenticity of a free and fair election in Cameroon over a few decades. Like I said, the current president of Cameroon, Paul Biya, has been in power since 1980s. And so we doubt very much that the elections in the past have been free and fair. But going forward, I think that there's been some electoral reforms that might ensure that this election in October might be different. And I think this is why the officials in government are feeling the heat, and they probably do not have a replacement for the current incumbent if he decides not to run.
Okay, shifting to the next topic now. The U.S. wants Rwandan troops out of Congo before a peace deal is signed. Is this a condition or is it a suggestion?
Well, for what we know, it seems like the proposed draft, the document was leaked to one of the main news outlets. I think it's Reuters. And those people that have seen the document make it very explicit that this seems to be a condition. Now, there was some investigative journalism that was done and tried to make sure that these are authentic documents. Neither U.S. officials, Rwandese officials, or even the DR Congo officials have actually confirmed that these are verifiable documents, that this is actually the draft. But it seems like from what we've heard, these drafts, these are serious drafts. The draft is serious, and these are documents that will be on the table as the two parties go to Washington, D.C. to sign the deal. The only problem is that if this is a condition for moving forward for this peace deal, I'm afraid Rwanda might decide to do otherwise. The reason why it's because the U.S. for the longest time have accused Rwanda of arming the M23 rebels and providing support to them, yet Rwanda has refused that they are not involved in the DR Congo.
And staying in the Congo, MSF, or Doctors Without Borders, has tallied the latest numbers in terms of sexual violence taking place there. And they are calling for a prioritization of aid in terms of dealing with this. But what else are they saying?
Well, the reports coming from Doctors Without Borders is very bad in the DR Congo, in the conflicted region. I think the reports show that up until 2024, there's been over 40,000 women, children that have been sexually violated. And so these are serious issues. And the other thing they're calling for is not only for an end to these kind of atrocities, but also they're calling for some kind of accountability. I think that they want the conflicted parties, regardless of who is right, who's wrong, both on the government side and the rebel forces, to stop this and stop immediately.
What immediate action is needed? Because this is a worrying trend.
I think some of the immediate actions that can be taken into account is to ensure that, first and foremost, this conflict concludes as soon as possible. I mean, there is hope now with the proposed peace deal in Washington, which is supposed to be signed in June this month. But also there's been some talks going on in Doha, in Qatar, concerning the same conflict. So the moment that you bring about the ceasefire, the moment that you can bring an end to some of these atrocities, and also it will be easy to account for who's responsible once there is a ceasefire. But once the fighting still goes on, it is very difficult to hold accountable those people that are responsible for such actions.
Well, let's leave it there for today, Aaron. Always great catching up with you on these conversations. You have a great rest of your Thursday.
Thank you very much. You have a wonderful day too.
Thank you. Aaron Ngambi, a geopolitical analyst, giving us analysis of the stories making headlines in the Central African region of our continent. It's 6:30 Central African time. That means time for news headlines. Here's Dwalani Tulo Mwebe.